And what we do is we give these guitars on a 2-year program to 4th and 5th graders around the country. Right now, we have access to 43 states, to 3,300 schools in the United States through programs called Little Kids Rock and Guitars in the Classroom. 2 programs that run in this country. They receive these guitars and they give them to the kids. They can play them in the class for 2 years. And if they stand up to the standard of playing, it's theirs for life.
What does it take to get a more in-depth look into the week's top local news story? The Debrief brings you inside for a one-on-one conversation with our reporters. Every week, right here, right now. The Debrief. David Broza is many things. Now, I don't even know if he likes this comparison, but I've heard him describe to his fans in Israel, he's the Israeli Bruce Springsteen. He's been on the same bill with Dylan and Van Morrison. He's a multi-platinum recording artist, but he's so much more than that. He has really become an ambassador for peace in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and that's going on 40 years. He wrote what's considered to be the anthem of that movement, Yeh Tov. And more importantly, since we try to do things focused on New York City and the tri-state in the Debrief, he is helping our young children right here to pursue the arts, to pursue music. So there's a lot to get to, and we're honored to have David Broza, a mutual friend, who's another fantastic guy named David. David Sable brought us together. And David, I'm happy to have you here.
Me too, David.
My friend.
I mean, all the Davids are...
All the Davids. It's
power of 3.
It's an abundance of riches. But recently, John Chandler did one of the stories, and we'll get to 1 million guitars in a moment, but I need to introduce you perhaps to some members of our audience of your journey on this. You wanted to be an artist, I thought, graphic artist growing up.
You're right, you have it all. So, I'm talking about at the age of 6, I found myself starting to draw, and that continued until I was 22. So, being immersed in my little room and painting and getting to know how to work with oils and acrylics and crayons and all that, through the years, I developed my technique in art and always thought that I'd be in the arts. As a matter of fact, it didn't even occur to me that while I picked up the guitar at the age of 12, that this would become my profession. I shied away from it, although I played a garage band. I did everything that you do by the book, in the book of rock and roll. Yeah. But the one thing I didn't have is aspirations to be a singer.
And let me paint in a little picture. Born in Israel, but raised also...
I was born in Israel.
Yeah.
And at the age of 12, my parents moved to Madrid, Spain, where I lived until I was 18. I went back to Israel. You have to do the military service for 3 years.
Mandatory.
Mandatory. After that, I needed a job, and everybody was recommending me as a musician to each other in the market. And Israeli poet by the name of Yonatan Geffen, an amazing and very controversial poet and writer, needed a sideman for a show. He was like the Lenny Bruce of Israel. So I was the sideman, and while at it, 2 months into the job, President Anwar Sadat of Egypt arrives in Israel for the first time. Thus starting the peace process.
This is 1977.
November 1977, right now. November 19th. Wow, tomorrow.
Wow. When
we're
sitting, yes. Yes.
Okay, we're not...
That's fine.
We're not exposing when we did it.
It's fair.
However, he writes a poem about this moment when President Sadat arrives in Israel, and he hands it to me and demands or commands me to write music to it. I'd never written a song before. I sat on the sofa. He gave me 48 hours until our next show, and I sat on the sofa, and I didn't leave that sofa until I got it right. And that was my first song, and it was that anthem that hence became the anthem of the peace process.
Yeh Tov.
Yeh Tov.
Which translates, things will be better.
Exactly. So since then, you know, the song started with 4 verses, and we always add a verse or 2. So by now we've got over 40 verses, 42 years later.
Right. And
I keep singing that song. It's become a real anthem, and it's very heartfelt, and it's almost like a prayer.
Right.
I even have a version of it with Jackson Brown, who I hosted in one of my sunrise concerts in the desert in Masada.
Right.
And we translated a little bit into English. It'll be all right. It said, and it's all right. Anyhow, I've been involved because and thanks to this music and the ability to play for so many different audiences. So I've been involved in all kinds of social activities outside of my stage performances and my albums, which means helping, you know, kids, homeless kids, delinquent kids, handicapped kids. Always with youth. I'm always interested in that. And I come from a home which is very involved in working on issues of coexistence and conflict resolution. As a matter of fact, my grandfather, his name was Wellesley Aaron, Major Aaron was known as, was a big Zionist, but he moved to Palestine in 1925. And he started a movement called Habonim, and later on in the years in the Jewish Brigade and the British Army. He did a lot of different activities, but in his latter years, he dedicated his time in trying to figure out how to create an educational program for youth to be able to direct them into conflict resolution and coexistence situations. And he went into high schools and started all these programs, at the end of which he created a village. He was one of the founders of a village called Neve Shalom, Wahat al-Salam, which is an Israeli-Palestinian village, where they actually live the curriculum and write it as they live. So I was brought up into that.
These were the seeds were planted in you.
Totally.
This has always been.
So it's not even a question as why am I doing this? It's
right.
not. It's like where am I doing it,
right.
and
right.
how do I find the right time and the right partners with whom to do it?
Right.
You know.
For our listeners who always know that there's a Mideast conflict and they hear it in the headlines, but may not be as familiar, certainly I've been fortunate to travel to Israel and kind of see this firsthand. Mm-hmm. It's hard to capture how deeply embedded this conflict is in the soil there, right?
Well, it's, you know, you said 40 years, but 40 years is the peace process.
Right.
Israel has been in conflict for 70 years
yes.
since the Declaration of Independence, but even more so. We call it a 100-year conflict right now. Ever since the Jews migrated to the Middle East, to Palestine, and hence from 1948 when they created the State of Israel, there's been a conflict. And there's many ways to look at it, and everybody's right. But there's got to be a settlement that will make a final statement and perhaps create a future right. for all the peoples living in the region. You know, we are the Jews, and there's the Palestinians, and there's the different Arab nations, and each one is adding a little more fire to the
right.
to the wood, and it's just a fire that has to be brought under control. Perhaps you'll never get rid of it, because people will be suspicious of each other. Look at the United States. You have here, you know, over 300 years of existence, right. and you have issues with the Native American, with the African American, you have the Jews, with the Hispanics. Everybody's got a problem,
right.
and everybody's right. So.
Along your journey, you had some defining moments in this. The East Jerusalem, West Jerusalem album, I guess it was. Tell me a little bit about that.
Wow, that's a very, to me, it's one of those things that after so many years of working.
And this is 2013, correct?
Yeah, 2013.
Yeah. After
so many years being involved in these sort of projects and taking on myself or just doing them alone, a friend of mine who actually managed me for a bit, Danny Goldberg, said one day, you know, if you do an album that relates to your work in East Jerusalem with the Palestinians, this might be something that of real interest to everybody, not just the Israelis and the Palestinians. So I took it to heart, and I started writing music. And he helped me and introduced me to Steve Earle, who's a great singer-songwriter in this country. And I asked Steve if he would come and produce this album. Now, I've been working in a studio in East Jerusalem, a Palestinian studio, since 1999. It's 20 years now. Back in 2013, even my Palestinian friend, Saeed Murad, said to me, you know, it's time you come and do another album, because every once in a while I'll do an album there. And I said, you know, I'm just thinking about that I'm going to do now. And so we moved into the studio, and the idea for me was to bring my Israeli band from Tel Aviv, entice some Palestinian musicians to come in, and spend 8 days and 8 nights in the studio. We also made it into a film, which then later on Netflix bought, and now it's back in my hands, and I got to find a way to show it.
Okay.
To show it, just to people see the magic of what happens.
Because people need to see that
see
more
the
often,
music.
to see that happens more often than they realize.
People want that.
Yeah.
People need that. So we spent 8 days and 8 nights with my musicians who, because they were reluctant to come to East Jerusalem, I said, so bring your wives, it'll feel better. Then the wives said, but we can't leave the kids. I said, bring the kids. Yeah, but we got to need our babysitter or our mother-in-laws. Bring the mother-in-law. You
cleared every hurdle.
Yeah, and exactly. And I took an entire hotel in East Jerusalem, and we spent 8 days of magic, of music, food, and camaraderie, and that's all part of the album, East Jerusalem, West Jerusalem. And the title song of that album, I co-wrote with somebody I wanted to come to East Jerusalem, and that was Wyclef Jean.
Wyclef Jean.
And he was so eager to come. He never made it. He once called me from Beirut and said, hey, Broza, I'm nearby. How far am I? I said, you know, just as far as the moon is from us. I mean, Beirut.
In many ways.
And Jerusalem, I wish.
Yeah.
The day will come.
Wow. To the point of why you intersect with us, John Chandler recently went up to this. This was a school. I know you've done it in the Bronx, also Brooklyn.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
1 million guitars. Tell us about this effort and how it came about and what you did recently.
So the brief story is that through my work in East Jerusalem, and around the time when I recorded the album, East Jerusalem, West Jerusalem, at night, after recordings, there was a Palestinian rapper who lives in a refugee camp, Shafat it's called. His name is Mohammed Mughrabi, and I love him. I've been with him since he was about 16. He'd perform with me, and I just love the fact that he promoted the same message that I would promote from the Israeli side and from the Palestinian. And he's a refugee. He's even on the lowest totem pole. And he invited me one night after midnight to come to visit him at the refugee camp. And I was devastated when I visited it. It's annexed, it's part of Israel, and it's a neighborhood that should get some treatment. It gets nothing. And instead of having up to 10,000 inhabitants, it has 80,000. So you can imagine, it's a slum. It's, you know, they don't even have any sanitation arrangements for picking up the garbage. So I was really shocked by it. And then he said, would you be interested in meeting some of the kids of the camp? I said, I'd love to. How can I do that? Israelis don't go in there. The police don't go in there. The army doesn't go. It's too dangerous. He said, I'll take care of it. And they got permission to use a building that was an old school building, and we started meeting there for workshops. And I started working with the kids, teaching them rhythm and music, showing them the magic of music. This was on the film too. And one day out in New York City, there was a big demonstration. Some guy calls out to me, Broza. He saw the film, obviously. He said, you should give out guitars to the kids. I said, really? I'm interested in giving them violas and cellos and stuff. Guitars. He gets closer. I said, let's go have a coffee. We had a coffee. He said, look, I'll help you. We'll put together a foundation, which I never wanted to have, but in this case was special. We'll call it 1 Million Guitars. You'll design a guitar. You'll take it all under yourself. I know you can do it. I'll be there to help. His name is Ido Segal. He's an ex-Israeli, but he lives in New York forever. And he gave me this idea, and I thought, it's not far from what it should be, the idea. So immediately I went and I designed this guitar. I put a heart instead of a hole.
Right.
And in the back, I put a motto. It says, I play, therefore I am, right here.
Right.
And I thought, okay, now let's figure out what we're doing.
So if you're just listening to us, where the usual hole is in the guitar is now in the shape of
just a heart.
Yeah.
As the Spaniards say, it's a guitar with a heart.
Yeah.
Una guitarra con corazón.
Yeah.
So I designed it. Now I had to find funding, which I still do perpetually, to produce these guitars, which we manufacture in China, but also make it so it's durable. It doesn't break. It's a very sturdy guitar, yet light.
For young students.
And designed for a young student. And what we do is we give these guitars on a 2-year program to 4th and 5th graders around the country. Right now, we have access to 43 states, to 3,300 schools in the United States, through programs called Little Kids Rock and Guitars in the Classroom. 2 programs that run in this country. They receive these guitars and they give them to the kids. They can play them in the class for 2 years. And if they stand up to the standard of playing, it's theirs for life. Wow. Now these kids, in most cases, come from very underprivileged background. So for them to get a gift like this, it's almost like we're telling, we entrust this and we trust you. You entrust this with you, but we trust you. And you'll make whatever you want with this. You don't have to become a musician. Just love the guitar, play it. Yeah. You can be a doctor, you can be a bus driver, you can be a baseball player. I don't care what you are. And it's been received with a lot of love and excitement. And here in the New York area, so we've been in the inner city and we've been to the Bronx and we've been to Brooklyn, and slowly I go to visit.
Right.
But we provide guitars to many, many schools. We've provided so far 1,300 guitars. Wow. And while we're speaking here, I'm starting now in the Middle East with Israeli and Palestinian schools, and somebody's asked if they can take some to Ethiopia. It has to come with a program. I don't just...
It has to be associated with,
Right. And now I'm just about ready to go from door to door and raise funds from corporations and people who want to see this guitar in their hands.
And the number 1 million, is that...
right now we've already 1,300, so it's less than 1 million.
Right, but you're shooting
one at a time. And another thing I've done in the meantime, which is great for this time of year, so there's a store out on Broome Street in Soho called Rudy's Guitar Store. And fantastic guitar store. If you have never seen a guitar store that looks more like a museum and you can touch the guitars, that's the place to go in general. But he has gotten so excited over this that he offered to sell the guitars And then I thought, okay, while we give them these guitars away to all these programs, we will sell it in such a way that if you buy a guitar, we will donate a guitar in your name to some child wherever. And every guitar has a passport number. See, there's a number here?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So we can follow these guitars, and we can know exactly where they are, how they're doing, and then you can hear them play.
Yes, would you let us hear your design guitar for a while?
Yeah, sing the song I did with White Kushan.
Yes.
Same face in the Gaza is the same face I see out in California. Same face in Jericho is the same face I see out in Mexico. Same face in Tel Aviv is the same face I see out in New Jersey. So many places all share the same faces. East Jerusalem, West Jerusalem, Shalom, Salam. East Jerusalem, West Jerusalem, Shalom, Salam. Same face in the Haifa is the same face out in Nevada. Same face in the blues is the same face out in New Orleans, singing the blues. Same face in London town, same face out in Kingston town. So many places, all share the same faces. East Jerusalem, West Jerusalem, Shalom, Salam. Feet in the sand, eyes in the sky, ears to the wall, say wondering if change ever gonna come at all. Spread a little love in the morning, spread a little love in the evening, spread a little love before you put your head down. Baby, when you wake up, the world will be a better place. East Jerusalem, West Jerusalem, Shalom, Salam. East Jerusalem, West Jerusalem, Shalom, Salam. Now the two Davids are going to sing together. West Jerusalem, Shalom, Salam. Get everybody there to sing. Come on, come on. East Jerusalem, West Jerusalem, Shalom, Salam. Yeah.
Oh man, brother.
So let us be.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I want to leave
Happy
it here.
holidays.
This is exactly, and it's airing at a time when we think about peace. It's the last question for you. You added a lyric to Yeh Tov. You add one, and you said, "We'll ultimately live under the olive trees, right, and be peaceful." But you said you thought you would only have to sing that song when you wrote it for a couple of months, and peace would be here.
True.
And it's still optimistic. Just recently, again,
Right.
more missiles rained down.
Right.
Over more targeted strikes in Gaza.
Right.
How do you find the hope? You always end it with hope. You have to hold to that hope. Where do
You
we leave
have to
people
hold it
in this season?
You have to. You got to wake up in the morning with hope. You can't wake up with the devastation in your heart, because you can only go further down. So, I mean, some people use a prayer, some use a mantra, some people just do exercise, and others sing. I go singing. I go sing all the time. I do the mantras, I do my prayers, I do my exercise, and I sing. And this song has never failed me. It doesn't matter whether you speak Hebrew and understand what I'm saying, or whether you're Spaniard or you're some farmer out in the Midwest, in Kentucky or in Indiana, or wherever I've played. And I guess there's a commonality to what we feel and what we want, all of us, which is peace and understanding, and it's not just a saying. Now, if you say it, it's going to eventually happen. If you're afraid of it, you don't believe it, you become, I don't know, you just become disappointed with the system and all that, then you let that disappointment overtake your life, and you can't go beyond it. You got to have mantras. I think Yetov, you know, this one goes. I'll just give you a taste of this because this one has 40-something verses.
Okay. Yeah, no, just a little bit.
We'll do it until next Christmas.
Yeah.
So this one says that we shall learn to live together under the olive trees, and that children will grow up knowing no more wars, no terror, and no frontiers, and that fresh new grass will grow over the graveyards for love and peace. For after 100 years of war, we haven't and will not lose hope. עוד נלמד לחיות ביחד בין חורשות עצי זיתים, ילדים יחיו בלי פחד, בלי גבולות, בלי מקלטים, על קברים נפרח העשב לשלום ואהבה, 100 שנים של חרב ועוד לא עבדה התקווה, ויהיה טוב, כן, לפעמים אני נשבע, אז הלילה, הלילה, איתך אני נשאר, and it's alright, it's okay, sometimes I just break down, but tonight I know, tonight our love will bring me back around.
Love you, brother.
Thank
David
you.
Broza, thank you so
Appreciate it.
much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I'm David Ushery, your host of the Debrief podcast and this concert. Just took over our newsroom. We want to thank Jesse Edwards and Harrison Troy, Ben Barkowitz from our digital team. I'll see you next time.
Happy holiday.